Mermaids were having a bit of a moment this past summer, between mermaid core being a thing now and, the film. I personally have not seen a Disney live-action remake since like 2019 for ethical reasons, not because I'm obnoxiously pretentious or anything. But people I trust very much enjoyed this film, so disquietingly realistic fish CGI aside, we have decided collectively to give it a pass. Also, Halle Bailey is lovely and her face is very mermaidy in a way I can't explain. I don't know, it's something about her eyes, like, she looks very pixie-like. She should also play a fairy. They should get her to play a fairy in some. They can't let this pass. This mermaid mania has me thinking two things. One, I should probably finish that mermaid novel I was meaning to write in time to capitalize off of this. She will not finish it in time. It takes her a week of mental prep time and 4 coffees to write one scene. The novel will be written in 2 to 5 years, and by then either AI will have made writing an obsolete pastime or mermaids will be back in. 2, there was a time I was like 5 and I had the Little Mermaid II on cassette tape and I watched it like 3 times a week because where else was I gonna find a princess who was a weird dark-haired little girl who liked exploring? At one point I campaigned to have my name changed to Melody, like how in Anne of Green Gables where she's like, oh, just call me Cordelia after my favorite main character.
Call me Cordelia.
Yeah, that was me and Melody. Disney released a bunch of these direct-to-video sequels in the late 90s and early 2000s. Instead of Walt Disney Animation, they were produced by Disney Television Animation, sometimes in collaboration with Disney Toon Studios, and after that there came a wave of midquels and prequels. Side note, midquels is a terrible word to say because D and Q are not consonants that go together. They should not be next to each other, not in any of the languages I speak at least. I think we should come up with a better one. I think we can do better. Please let me know if you have suggestions. There were creative premises, like you've heard of Hamlet but with lions, can I interest you in Romeo and Juliet but with lions, and hey guys, meet Aladdin's long lost dad, who is you can't say that on camera. None of these movies were critically very well received for reasons that I don't think I have to explain to you. But they weren't trying to win Oscars, they were trying to sell cassette tapes to school-age children, and you know what? It worked. I love the movie. Having been reminded of both the existence of the film and my enjoyment of it, I decided I was long due a rewatch, this time with the added benefit of, like, having taste. And, like, this film is not good, not by any classic metric of quality. The animation looks like that. And the plot falls apart like a house of cards if you squint at it a little too hard. But I think there's something special about this movie. There's a subtle emotional intelligence to the writing. Given a bigger budget and a couple more drafts of the script, the film still wouldn't have been great, but it could have been okay-ish. It could have even been good. I have scoured the internet for like nostalgic think pieces like these childhood favorites often get, but having found none, I have decided to take the burden upon myself. You're welcome. So the emotional, thematic core of this movie is the relationship between Ariel and her daughter Melody. This is a film about mothers and daughters. It's the Ladybird of bad Disney movies, if you will. As any daughter with a mother, or vice versa, could tell you, it sure is an experience. An experience that comes with just this built-in tension and conflict that's surprisingly difficult to portray on film, hence why Lady Bird resonated with so many women. See Brave for another attempt by Disney. Reception mixed. But here it's done with a surprising level of nuance, and I think that the reason the film works as well as it does is because of the character of Melody. But first, brief plot synopsis for the uninitiated. Like many of its contemporaries, The Little Mermaid II has what I call a next generation plot, which means that it is the same movie made again but with the main character's kids. Here we're introduced to Princess Melody, looking very cute in her little christening gown. Ariel and Eric take her out to meet the fun side of the family when, gasp, Morgana the Sea Witch, Ursula's crazy sister, is targeting Melody. For some reason, despite there being multiple other members of Triton's family much more conveniently in the water. As a result of this harrowing experience, Ariel decides to go all tiger parent and ban her daughter from ever even thinking about water. Instead of moving their kid to like an inland summer residence, Ariel and Eric decide to spend valuable resources from the royal treasury to build a seawall to keep in one preteen. Melody grows up very sheltered, much like a homeschooler, and about as awkward. She's never told her mother's true identity, or that mermaids are real, or why she should stay away from the ocean, which she goes into anyway because she's a preteen and also because she feels a longing for it. Her mother was a mermaid who loves the land, Melody is a human who yearns for the sea, get it, get it? On her 12th birthday, Melody discovers verifiable proof her parents have been lying to her all her life and runs away to the ocean to find herself. Her parents and grandfather go after her, but too late, Melody has already been manipulated into stealing Grandpa Sea King's all-powerful trident and handing it over to the woman who is Ursula's sister and still referred to as the Crazy One. The climax is about the same as the last one, and then stuff kind of works out because it's a Disney movie. Melody is hands down the best part of this film. Even people who otherwise hate it have been known to admit this, and childhood legend Tara Strong often calls this her favorite role. She's just so refreshing for a Disney heroine, especially for the time. Her character design is cute and childish instead of like borderline pinup. And I also like how instead of making her a carbon copy of her mother, they gave her some of her dad's features, like the thicker eyebrows and the plumper lips. The most interesting thing about Melody is her core character struggle, which I think her writers hit upon by sheer accident by making this film a carbon copy of the last film. The mandated arc goes, Princess yearns for sea, is taken advantage of by malicious sea witch, throw in a reluctantly chaperoning crab for good measure. But they had to be sneaky about the self-plagiarism, and this character is younger, so they kept the arc but changed the motivation. Ariel's motivation in the first film was, yes, her curiosity about human culture, but more so her crush on Eric. Melody's motivation is her love for the sea, made stronger by her sense of tweenage angst about not fitting in amongst her peers. The sea is her only respite to that. It's the only place she feels like herself. Being one of the outsiders isn't exactly uncommon as a motivation for animated characters. My theory is that there's something about being an artistic or creative person that makes you a weird kid, and these are the kinds of people that go on to make animated movies. But from a writing standpoint, it makes sense to make your character the underdog because, like, it's an easy way to create sympathy. Just off the top of my head, Disney movies that do this are Pinocchio, Beauty and the Beast, Mulan, Frozen, Moana, kind of. And of course, it also shows up in The Little Mermaid. In Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, the princess's love for the prince is her only real motivation. Later, she also wants an immortal soul, which mermaids do not already have for some reason. But the initial reason she wants the soul in the first place is so she can be with the prince, so I'm gonna bundle them as one character motivation. Interestingly enough, in this version, it's her sisters who decorate their gardens with trinkets from stolen ships. They're the ones that are really curious about human culture, while the youngest sister, the Little Mermaid, only has a marble bust that resembles her prince. In the 80s film, they cut the immortal soul and added Ariel's anthropomorphic? She's already anthropomorphic, girl. She has a human upper body. In the 80s film, they cut the immortal soul and added Ariel's anthropological tendencies, probably in part to like preemptively address complaints that she's only doing this for a man. Ariel's passion for collecting did wonders for her as a character. It made her more realistic, it made her more likable, it gave her 3 times the personality of past Disney princesses. This is not a dig at past Disney princesses. It's like a thing that Ariel was the first time they were allowed to give her facial expressions. We respect the past princesses. But plot-wise, it doesn't really do much. Like, sure, we have the dingle hopper moment, and it's adorable. But once she gets her legs, the movie is really about her trying to kiss Eric. It's a very lovable character quirk, but as it pertains to the story, it's tacked on since it was an addition to the adaptation. In the latter half, at least, where the bulk of the plot happens, I will grant you that Ariel's exploring and collecting are plot relevant in the first act of the film. So for Ariel, the thing that makes her different is a character quirk. But for Melody, it's baked in, which is how this film came up with a compelling protagonist by sheer happenstance. She is strangely drawn to the ocean and feels at home there. People think she's weird because she talks to fish. Talking to fish is admittedly a little weird, though mostly cool. But all this stuff makes sense because she's half mermaid. There is a reason, like an actual genetic reason for her weirdness. Ariel's thing that made her different was an interest, a hobby, but Melody's is literally her cultural heritage. She is half mermaid, she just doesn't know because no one ever told her. And you know who could tell her? Her mother. At this point in the story, the character isn't really Ariel anymore, she is Melody's mom. I think this is something that happens a lot to parents, and especially to mothers, where you lose your sense of self in pursuit of being a good parent. Ariel at the beginning of the film is very much still herself. She's cheerful and she's excited to introduce her daughter to her family and to Atlantica. When the crazy sea witch captures her, Ariel doesn't yell, "Do something!" She grabs her husband's sword with her own 2 hands and does something herself. Watch the hair. There's hair symbolism going on with Ariel throughout the film. Here, Ariel is still herself and her hair is loose, but after Morgana, Ariel completely abandons her mermaid self because her daughter's safety is more important. The seawall is built, the hair goes up, and Ariel has presumably little to no contact with her family. She is sacrificing it all for Melody. And it doesn't even work. It just makes them both miserable. Melody is still sneaking out towards the sea, and Ariel still misses her home. There's a scene where Ariel is by the shore and just needs a moment with the water, like lets herself have this moment of peace, but she immediately backtracks on it and covers up. And Melody sees her mom and kicks her bag of seashells under her chair so there's no proof she snuck out. They're hiding the same thing from each other, that connection with the ocean. And afterwards, Ariel climbs up, and we have this tender mother-daughter moment where she's helping her fix her hair. And Melody starts to confide in her, but she holds back. Ariel's like, oh, I felt just like you when I was your age, and Melody straight up does not believe her, because why would she? She doesn't really know Ariel, she knows her mother. But neither of them want to hide this part of themselves from each other. In the second musical number, for a moment, oh yes, there are musical numbers. Melody has just been transformed into a mermaid, and Ariel is in the water looking for her. When Melody is expressing her newfound joy, she says, I wish my mother could see me, the sea is my song, because she still wants that validation. She wants to share the joy. Meanwhile, Ariel is exploring all her own haunts. Side note, didn't this place get like super destroyed when Triton blew it up? And she sings about how she wishes she could have shared all of this with her daughter. Ariel and Melody could have been open and vulnerable with each other, but they weren't, because Melody was afraid of getting in trouble and Ariel was afraid of putting her daughter in danger. The fear holds them back. Fear is the natural enemy of vulnerability and emotional intimacy. There's an inherent irony to it, Ariel holding back her true self to protect her daughter, but in the process just hurting her more, while Melody feels lonely because there's no one else like her and she doesn't know that her mother is right there feeling the exact same things. It's cyclical. They mirror each other. How's that for a bad Disney sequel? It kind of reminds me of the neurodivergent experience, growing up with the intense feeling that you're different, there's something wrong with you, but not being able to tell exactly what it is, only sure that everyone around you can see it. And since things like ADHD and autism tend to run in families, there's a high likelihood that one of your parents struggles with the same thing, but is unable or unwilling to offer support because they don't recognize or haven't come to terms with the struggle within themselves, or because they think that if they were able to power through it, their child should be able to as well. Plus, Ariel's weird traits of collecting things and being obsessed with something considered strange also feels very neurodivergent. You could probably also read this as a metaphor for being biracial or like bicultural, like having parents from two different cultural backgrounds, but I do not have the experience nor the qualifications to speak on that, so moving on. The thing about Ariel's overprotective parenting is that, like many people's overprotective parenting, it doesn't work. It results in a kid who is completely defenseless. Melody doesn't know anything about the ocean. She doesn't know there's a witch out to get her, she doesn't know that she's related to Triton, and these are things that make her instantly vulnerable to be preyed upon by Morgana. It's like if a kid who's never been allowed to touch a computer got on social media for the first time, the internet predators are gonna swoop in like sharks who smelled blood in the water. Side note, there's this running gag about Morgana having mommy issues and needing to prove herself better than her sister, but it's not just a joke because she technically uses it to like endear herself to Melody and manipulate her when they first meet. So, film about mothers and daughters and how mothers' fears are reflected in daughters. It's thematically relevant. It's a motif. The climax of the film is very much Melody's moment. Morgana magically compels all sea creatures, but Melody's got her legs so she doesn't have to obey. She can climb up to Morgana and get her hands dirty. It's a moment of triumph where the thing that made her different is now her greatest strength. Melody's arc is realizing that there was never anything wrong with her to begin with. Ariel's arc has a little more going on. Throughout the film, we see her lose and then regain her connection with the sea. Again, watch the hair. It's down, and then it goes up, and then when she reconnects with her mermaid self, the hair comes back down, and there's this bittersweet look on her face, and the hair stays down for the rest of the film. After turning red in Encanto, people were making all these jokes about like, haha, millennials writing fantasy movies where the fantasy is the parents apologize, but look, this movie does that too. The mermaids have generational trauma, which is why I hate the common complaint that this movie is just Ariel repeating Triton's mistakes, and she should have learned from him and she should have known better. Because in the real world, people never repeat their parents' mistakes, nor are they ever afraid of turning into their parents, right? So Ariel apologizes. She accepts herself, she accepts her daughter, and she realizes she really can't have one without the other. This has been a little embarrassing to write because, like, it's the Little Mermaid 2. It's not War and Peace, it's a little weird to be taking it this seriously. But stories are stories, writing is writing, so in accordance with the wisdom bestowed on me by the film, I will not hide away a facet of myself for outward approval, and I will try very hard not to apologize for my earnestness. A lot of my affection for this film is undoubtedly due to the fact that I've loved it since before I can remember. I didn't just watch it as a kid, I watched it when I was barely more than an infant. And with stories that have been with you that long, there's this chicken or the egg type of enigma where it's like, did you like it that much because it resonated with you, or did it have a hand in creating the thing in you that it now resonates with? Stories don't necessarily have to be well written in order to affect you. But then again, there are other films that I loved at that age that haven't held up in the same way. Strawberry Shortcake does not contain the traces of themes like societal expectations upon mothers and generational trauma. Melody meant a lot to me as a little girl. The other Disney princesses were beautiful, but they were largely grown-ups and they were motivated by romantic love. I admired them, but I could never be them. I was a strange little girl who didn't always get along with the other kids and didn't always get along with her mom, and wouldn't you know, there's a Disney princess for that. I don't think that I still relate to Melody, but I associate her with my younger self, so I have a lot of affection for her. So I can't really tell if I'm making points of genuine merit or if I'm projecting hard. What is more valuable, the act of analyzing or the thing being analyzed? I don't know. Whichever the case, I maintain that there is something special about this film, regardless of its quality. It tells little girls and also their mothers that the things that make you different are the things that make you you. And trying to pretend they're not there is just gonna hurt you and the people around you in the long run. It's not a bad thing to hear, even now.